Warm greetings to you from the International Committee for October 17th, a committee that serves as a bridge between the United Nations partners and people with lived experiences of poverty to commemorate October 17th, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. I would like to congratulate the Conference of INGOs of the Council of Europe in organizing this timely webinar on putting an end to non-take-up of rights, and to the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights for his excellent report submitted to the United Nations Human Rights Council in June of this year. The subject that you have chosen for today's discussion fits perfectly well with this year's global theme for October 17th, Dignity for All in Practice, the commitments we make together for social justice, peace, and the planet. Addressing obstacles to the non-take-up is essential in achieving dignity for all in practice. As you discuss the topic today at the European level, we would like to share with you a few experiences of either non-take-up or successful take-up of rights, or steps taken towards take-up of rights from other parts of the world.
Despite the International Declaration of Human Rights that could address poverty, the lack of freedom to live with dignity prevents the poor in third world countries like the Philippines to access adequately the basic necessities in life. The non-take-up of rights as the failure of society and the government to take the responsibility to lift up the poor from those deplorable conditions of poverty persist due to the absence of the consciousness of the poor. In the Philippines, we look forward to the advancement of digital technology to enhance the critical consciousness of the poor to take up their rights themselves.
There are many different examples in Latin America, but what we have learned is that where there is strong political will, like that of Bolsa Familia in Brazil, take-up of rights is higher, and the lesson from my own country, Guatemala, is that we need to design programs that includes and reaches out to those who are furthest behind. Let me give you some examples. The Bolsa Familia program was the flagship program introduced in 2003 by President Lula, and because of the strong political will and the campaigning to reach the poorest, the program reached over 50 million people, a major portion of the country's low-income population. One recent lesson from Guatemala, which I am sure is also true in many other countries, is that we really need to do better at reaching the poorest. For example, there were a number of social protection systems that the government introduced to help vulnerable families cope with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Those most in need were not included in the social protection systems because there was no consolidated registry of people in vulnerable situations, and many of them were too far out to reach. A major initiative the government introduced in Guatemala was the family bonus, which has been hailed as a success, but in fact, this cash transfer program initially excluded many of the poorest sectors of the population because the identification for eligibility was based on households with low electricity consumption levels. However, what the policymakers forgot was that many of the poorest households don't even have electricity connection. So adjustments had to be made to expand coverage. In Guatemala, it is not so much the issue of non-take-up of rights because the poorest need and want access, but the lesson for us is that we need to design programs and policies that reach the furthest behind.
In Africa, 1.2 billion Africans live without any social protection coverage. The social protection coverage is only 17% of the total population compared with the global average of 47%. So we are way behind Europe and the rest of the world. Extending social protection coverage has been enshrined in the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. of the African Union, Africa has a long way to go, both in coverage of social protection rights and their take-up. The Special Rapporteur for Extreme Poverty and Human Rights quite rightly identified lack of birth registration as a main obstacle for accessing rights. Without a birth certificate, a child cannot enroll for school, receive legal protection or healthcare services. Birth registration rates are as low as 39% in West and Central Africa due to the lack of efficient communication between rural villages and national birth registration offices. Mobile technology is helping to address this. For example, in Senegal and Uganda, the telephone operators Orange and Telecoms Mobile are just two examples of mobile phone companies who are helping to address this special problem.
Wherever we are in the world, if we are to improve access to rights, we need to take account of the hidden dimensions of poverty. The institutional maltreatment, the poverty-based discrimination, the shame and stigma of being poor, and all obstacles for accessing rights. In Ireland, we are currently engaged in a campaign to include poverty-based discrimination as the 10th ground of discrimination in Irish equality legislation, so that people experience socio-economic discrimination have legal redress and a protection in the law. Also, we have to remember that non-take-up of rights is neither a lack of interest nor a personal failure of the rights holders, but the lack of information about their existence or excessive administrative barriers in accessing these rights.
The rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, guaranteed in the various international human rights instruments and regional instruments like the Revised Social Charter of the Council of Europe, should not remain paper promises. They must be realized. Social protection schemes are not charitable schemes, but fundamental human rights. And if these rights are to be realized, people in poverty must be involved in their design, monitoring, and evaluation. On this day, 17th of October, a day devoted to breaking the silence of poverty, a day where people with lived experiences are at the front and center of the commemorations, a day where the impossible becomes possible, we leave you with some of the images of how this day is being commemorated all around the world. We, members of the International Committee for October 17th, extend our friendship and solidarity to you all at the Council of Europe. We are in this together. We leave you with the words of Bertine, an activist living in poverty from Burkina Faso. We have to fight for dignity together, because my dignity is nothing if my neighbor has none. Wishing you all the best with your deliberations today, and thank you.